This is BS on Broadcasting. David Brody, a former national radio host and talent coach with 4 decades in the industry.
You gotta understand what the score is and where you are in the game.
And Marc Serber, a commentator who's called and hosted soccer matches for leagues and competitions around the world.
Real panic defending from DC United and continues here. And the beat is finally beaten. It's the opening goal for Chivas USA.
Together, they're on a mission to help every broadcaster be their best by learning from the best. And always talking BS. Brody, Serber on Broadcasting.
Welcome to BS on Broadcasting, where our mission is to help all sports broadcasters be their best by learning from the best. I'm Marc Serber, joined alongside my host, David Brody, who is a former national sports radio host and talent coach, and Shawn Medow is a broadcaster out of Los Angeles, an excellent young and up-and-coming broadcaster. And we are so lucky to be joined here today by Dave Johnson, who's not only the radio host of the Washington Wizards, but also the play-by-play man for DC United and has done a lot of national work as well. And Dave, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. It is such an honor to have you. I know you're not supposed to fanboy out, but the way that I have always kind of judged the best broadcasters is by if there's a moment in sports and I don't just remember that moment, but I remember the call that goes with it. And for me, one of the first calls I remember growing up was it was a Maryland game and they scored to make it 3-2. And hearing you on home team sports, which back in the day was before really you could get just any game from anywhere. And so if there was something on home team sports, we were tuning in and just hearing you go, it's in the net with that team featuring Chris Armas. That's something that I'll always remember. So it is such an honor to have you here tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Well, that's very kind and very humbling. And again, I think about, as I watched and listened to people as I came up, and it still goes through my head. And so it believe me, it humbles me beyond belief that I don't even think about that somebody might enjoy what I'm doing or whatever. It means the world to me. So thank you for that.
Well, of course. And we're going to focus on just that tonight, because in DC, you have such an incredible relationship with this town. And it's not only the work with the Wizards and DC United, but it's also on WTOP. It's everything else that you do. And so what we want to focus on here tonight is how you as a broadcaster cultivate that relationship with your audience, which seems like it seems like, oh, that should be a topic. But the bottom line is, you're cultivating a relationship where it's not really a two-way conversation. They're not talking back to you in the middle of a game or in the middle of a hit. And so we're going to dive right into it, because we're recording this just 2 nights after the Wizards dropped a 35-point lead against the Clippers. And one of the things is, how do you kind of make sure to be critical of a team when there's a right to be critical of them, but also at the same point realizing who you're representing?
Well, I think first and foremost, in whatever you do, you just need to be authentic and honest. I always tell people that, a John Madden would have never occurred if a consultant got a hold of him. They would have said, well, don't do this, and you're using words, and they would have tried to mold him. Instead, he was just who he was. So I think you just need to be authentic and honest. Otherwise, the listeners and viewers are too smart. They're gonna figure you out. So I also think when it comes to broadcasting, any criticism, just don't make it personal. A broadcaster, Thomas Ronga, that I worked with DC United for years, we'd always talk about, don't say anything you wouldn't say to a player's face in the locker room postgame, because regardless of how bad a night, we all have bad nights. We have bad broadcasting nights. The accountant has a bad accounting day. Everybody has a bad day. You hope you don't have many bad days where you blow a 35-point lead like the other night. It really left all of us in disbelief. But they didn't go out and intend to do that. So I think when it comes to criticism, it's not about being personal. It's about we all live now in a world where we're hiding behind phones. I don't know if this phone is showing up on this video, but that's the importance of direct communication, that don't say anything that you wouldn't say to somebody in a regular conversation. I think if you frame that, then any criticism is fine, because if somebody comes to me and is critical of my broadcasting, if they frame it in a way that's constructive, I'll first of all tell them they're nuts. How could I be doing anything wrong? But no, the bottom line is, we live in this social media world where we're probably not as professional and nice as we should be. And so, the other night was difficult, but there's no way, as you have to earn the trust of the viewer or the listener. And so you have to also let them know that you're on this journey with them. And I think that's what I've always tried to do as a broadcaster. And when I say try to do, I think about, my broadcasting journey is really born out of my relationship with my mother and the importance of radio to her. She had what I have now. It's a disease called multiple sclerosis. Unfortunately, she was confined to a wheelchair. So that connection with the radio was very important, or the television for that matter, but especially the radio, because it's such a personal medium. So I still believe that even though you can't see who you're talking to, I still believe, like when I was a kid doing play-by-play for my mom, I still believe there's that one-on-one connection, and I want that, and that's the way I think I broadcast, but it's not born out of anything. I sat down and said, well, I'm going to be, this way, and I designed myself this way. This is what I've been doing since I've been 6 years old. It's the beauty of what we do is broadcasters is, you don't want to feel, even though there's an app in front of the person or window from the television, you don't want to feel that separation. You want to feel that connection. And so I'm hoping to create that connection.
And speaking of, first of all, social media and that connection as well, one thing that's become really big, and anybody tuning in the DC metropolitan area will know about this, is the hashtag radio party. And I was just wondering how you guys came up with that and cultivated it, because it's huge. And every single game, no matter what the score is, the quarter, anything, just all these people tweeting in, hey, I'm here for the hashtag DC radio party. And, it was such a great community building thing on Twitter. And I was just kind of wondering how you guys came up with that and kind of how you built that and cultivated it.
The beauty was it was organic. It was when Twitter started to become a thing, we thought, well, we'll throw our Twitter handles out there, and it's like the old cliche of if a tree falls and nobody hears it, did it really fall? And so the next thing you know, people started reacting and responding, and we got into critical debates like Five Guys versus In-N-Out Burgers, or Twizzlers versus Red Vines Licorice, or the real issues of the day. But and the beauty of the hashtag radio party, we didn't coin that phrase. It was not, we didn't sit in a room and say, well, as this built steam, and this would have been in the 2013-2014 Wizard season, and it coincided, fortunately, with a successful run. There was some momentum with the team. They were going to make the playoffs for the first time in several years. And the next, people said, this is kind of like a party, because the beauty is it's connecting not only fans with us, but fans with other fans. And I've heard great stories over the years of listeners saying, I met, somebody on a metro, and the only way I recognized them was from their Twitter, and we'd be back and forth during Twitter. And so, and it's evolved into we get a bunch of listeners. It's usually about 50 or 60 every summer together, and it is every walk of life imaginable. And that's the beauty of sports and broadcasting. You would never get the collection we get together unless it was this bond of interest in Wizards basketball. It's everything from a lawyer to a maintenance worker and that type of thing. And suddenly, you find out how you really are all the same.
Dave, I want to go back to the game the other night where the Wizards blew the 35-point lead and 8-point lead in the final minute. And for young broadcasters, I think this could be a really good learning experience. You're talking about you don't want to be personal. Can you give us some examples of how you go about phrasing what is happening on the court as the team is losing a 35-point lead? Again, you don't want to be too personal. So how do you handle that?
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned that game again tonight. I'm going to have a headache by the end of this get together tonight because I've been trying to put that game out of my mind. But it truly was such a surreal experience because, needless to say, it's the second greatest comeback in terms of what the Clippers did against the Wizards. So it's not really a game situation I had ever experienced. One of my mom's favorite phrases, you just keep showing up to see what happens next. Well, I never expected, that kind of swing, but, and it was, quite frankly, as I drove home that night, I thought I was actually afraid to listen to some of the highlights from the game because I thought, well, was I too critical? Was I not critical enough? Because as it was unraveling in front of me, and literally it was unraveling, there was a part of me that a large part of me from my NBA experience, like the NBA is a game of runs, as you all know. So it didn't surprise me that the lead went from 35 to 20. But at some point I just expected, because I'd seen this script over and over again, that it was going to stop and they were going to put them away and that'd be the end of it. And that didn't happen. So I think, we fairly addressed why it was happening, that they stopped attacking. That's not personal. That's just an observation that there was a real leadership void on the court. That's not meant to indict anybody personally, but if you didn't, as a team, the Wizards in a game against the Clippers where they blew a 35-point lead, you didn't have the right leadership on the court saying, all right, that's it. We're gonna stop this and we're gonna put our foot down and on their throat and end this craziness. So again, I think it's about making rational observations in the midst of what seems irrational, because at that point you still need to be the storyteller, not the fan that wants to tweet anger and say I'm done with this team and et cetera, et cetera. This team is still trying to figure it out in real time. It's just that it kept unraveling. So again, I think the key is don't make it personal, but you've got to be honest. You've got to always be honest, because if not, you're not fooling anybody. Either they're watching or listening and they understand what's going on, and so you've got to be honest.
And it's obviously very important to not become too emotionally involved in whether or not the team wins or loses. I have a friend who broadcasts in the NBA for a number of years, and he broadcasts a bad team. And he told me the story that one day his wife went up to him and said, "You are taking this too personally." She said, "The players aren't taking it this personally, so you shouldn't take it so personally." How do you guard against that?
Well, I think it's also, and it seemed like I said the other night. I mean, you don't. At the end of the day, nobody died. It was a competition, and a crazy thing happened. But don't take anything. Take what you do serious, but don't take yourself too serious. I think that's a good adage for life in general. And I think. The beauty is that that's why we're so intrigued by sports. That's why in this day and age, sports remains the one thing people want to watch live. You can't binge watch a whole season of your favorite team. You've got to go on the journey, and we truly don't know what happens next. And I used it in a post game, not trying to put a rose-colored spin on a 35-point loss, but just reminding people that I remember 4 years ago the Wizards losing by 47 points, and the very next night Bradley Beal had his first 50-point game of his career and winning. So that's, that gets back to that phrase, you keep showing up to see what happens next. You don't know. As dark as it felt after the Clippers game for the Wizards, if suddenly they win 3 straight in a row against quality opponents, that game is forgotten. So that's why we're doing this. That's why we're so hooked into sports. That we've all been doing this for a number of years. Nobody's ever given me a script explaining what's going to happen next. And I can think of years where I'd be in the hotel lobby and the strength and conditioning coach, after a bad loss the night before, says, this team is not going to win another game for the rest of the month. And they start a 5-game winning streak. So you just don't know. And that's why we watch. That's why we listen. And that's, the fact that there's a next game is always keeps me optimistic and encouraged. And that gets back to why I do this in the first place. And it gets back to my mother and experiences as a child. I still believe sports is the most incredible 2 or 3 hours of magic time. Whatever is going on in your life, whatever health challenges are going on in your life, suddenly, that's not first and foremost. All of a sudden, you're just worried about, what's the score, and am I going to catch the free T-shirt that's thrown in the crowd? It's still just such a magic time for me. Every time I'm allowed to get behind a microphone, it's just a magic time. So the Clippers game was a bad loss, but I'm so excited that we're going to have another game Saturday against Memphis. Maybe we'll lose that too, but I'm going to be excited about the next game after that, because there's always a chance that something magical, something you didn't expect is going to happen. And let's face it, with every game, you don't know what's going to happen. So every game is like unwrapping a present.
Brody, what you're forgetting is that there already is a playbook for how to deal with that. And it goes back to the first major league. When the team is on a losing streak, you're drinking whiskey or bourbon in the booth. And then when they start winning, you're drinking water again.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, but there is something to it. And I'm not harping on this Clippers game, but the bottom line is, when you are the announcer for a home team and you travel with them on the road and you get to know these guys and you know their personal lives, you do develop a rapport and a personal relationship with them. And so, again, we said not taking those losses too hard, but, have there ever been a time where you've had to kind of separate that in terms of, wanting the best for the guys and the players and these people that you've built relationships with over years, and having to kind of separate that when you go into the booth to call a game? And obviously some, in some towns and some like college football places, they love their hometown, kind of homers, and it can be fun. But in other places, you want them to be, you want to be, obviously, who you're representing, but you want to be as professional as you can. Have you ever kind of had that experience, and how did you have to kind of separate that from wanting the best for these people you've developed a rapport with versus having to deal with the adversity kind of they're dealing with?
I think naturally, when you're broadcasting in a home team broadcast circumstance, you're typically going to be more excited for the home team, but you still respect the game, and that's another phrase that I like to live by: respect the game, enjoy the moment. So if Kobe Bryant does in his day did an amazing play the other night, I had to as I called the game against the Clippers, had to respect what the Clippers did with only 2 starters playing in the second half. And so knowing that my audience is predominantly probably Wizards fans, I don't want to sound jingoistic in the Clippers, but I also, as I called the end of the game, talked about the Clippers' excitement mobbing, the players mobbing each other on the court because they created an incredible comeback. So I think it's just really the because each game is its own entity, it's kind of easy to separate if you just respect what both sides are doing, and that's why it's easy not to make things personal or whatever, because when you get to know all of these incredible athletes, they're not like all of us. They're not trying to have a bad day or do their job poorly, but it happens. And nobody wants to be, again, fan comes from, fanatic or whatever. And I'll deal with post-game callers that want to fire everybody and trade everybody after every loss. And that's understandable. And you appreciate that, the emotion and the passion, but the reality is you have to bring it down a notch and know that these really are, whatever sport it is, some of the best athletes in what they do, and just enjoy it.
So I wanted to ask about your catchphrase. For me, that will always stick is "it's in the net." I don't know when I first heard it, but I remember hearing it. I remember hearing it again and then realizing who it was calling it. I grew up in California, went to school in Oregon, and I'm still in California. You're not my local broadcaster, but I would hear it sometimes. And I was always fascinated by it. And then one day, I don't remember how, but I put it together and I went, this is incredible. Like, that's who does it. And I've avoided copying it, doing soccer, doing hockey. And I just was curious how you came up with it, how you tried it out, how you avoided copying other people's catchphrases, and then how it stuck.
That's a interesting way. I do know that "it's in the net" comes from my time doing indoor soccer in the late '80s, which was a major indoor soccer league, but I don't remember why I started it, and I don't even remember, because this is the '80s. Dinosaurs were still roaming the earth then. There was no Twitter or people reacting, but you would get fans come up and start, yelling it back at you, and you realize, well, most of the goal calls I was saying, it's in the net. And I have a similar for 3-pointers. For the Wizards, I'll say it's there. But again, this is not like I sat in a room and started scribbling down, like, all right, let me try, it's this, it's that, or whatever. It just kind of organically started. In fact, as I've gone back and people have asked me about the Wizards call, and I've gone back and I'll find an old tape from 1999. I'll hear it. And I'll think, well, at least I was doing it then, but I don't remember when that started. But it's in the net. I do remember it was born out of when I was a Baltimore Blast radio announcer. This is back in the first major indoor soccer league. And to me, the goal in soccer is such a wonderful moment, just because unlike basketball, where there's lots of points and lots of balls that go through the net, so to speak, it's a moment that we should celebrate and express some passion about. And so I do get excited with a goal call, and that has become, more my natural, what I say now. I've had people that don't like it, and I've had people criticize me for it, and I'd be lying if I didn't say there was a time where it would get into my head, and I'd think, well, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, but then it still felt natural to me, and that gets back to how this conversation started, where you need to be yourself and authentic and who you are. And so I am a generally enthusiastic person. Maybe some people find that over the top. Maybe some people like it, but this is who I am.
Shawn, can I just follow up real quickly on that? If, Dave, you have a catchphrase, how often should you use it?
Well, I mean, the "it's in the net." I just use now for when DC United scores, the team I call for. It's kind of like for lack of a better way of saying it, it's kind of my goal call, but it's not like I have to do it for everyone. But I think, again, if it feels natural, I mean, with the basketball call for 3-pointers, when I say it's there, because a 3-point shot is, even though now in the NBA it's more prevalent than ever before, it's not a guaranteed, it's a long distance shot. So I'm not going to say, it's there for a 10-foot jumper. But a lot of shots made in the course of a basketball game, and if you make 9 or 10 3-pointers, that's a lot over a course of 48 minutes. So again, I think it gets back to how it feels natural, and I think that's also part of sometimes with just staying in the moment. And that's why sometimes when I'll go back and have to listen to what I said on a certain call or whatever, just because I really didn't plan it. And so then I'm wondering, all right, did I get that right? Or did I express the proper emotion? It was what I was doing at the moment, but it was not scripted. It was what I was feeling at that moment. But then you're wondering, well, I hope it was the right, tone.
So something else I was curious about with your calls is when you go into a new co-commentator, just in general, and say you get a color commentator, an analyst who you haven't worked with, just how you build that chemistry to sound like you have chemistry at that point on air, and how you're able to, let plays breathe, let big moments happen, and what that kind of conversation's like. Is there any kind of chemistry building that you're doing prior? What that kind of thing is over the years when you've had new co-commentators?
I think, again, I keep having to use the same phrases like natural, authentic, but I mean, you can get a feel, or I can anyway, and I've had to do it this year with on Wizards Radio, where my normal partner Glenn Consworth had to do some television, and then Megan McPeak, who is a very, very talented, not only play-by-play person, but she can also analyze a basketball game. But I mean, two vastly different personalities. Glenn was a former player, much older. Megan is younger, et cetera. But I think broadcasting there's a texture and a conversation to it, and I think about the soccer co-commentators had it from my current one, Devin McTavish, to whether it's John Harkes, to a Thomas Rongden, to a Gordon Bradley, who helped bring Pele over with the Cosmos, for goodness sakes. I just get a sense of what they're about, and because the goal in a play-by-play setting, especially on television, I've always said doing play-by-play on television is you're almost like an airline pilot. You're supposed to make sure the plane takes off and lands, and there's not that much turbulence in between. And you want to make the color commentator shine, and really, that's where I think it adds to the chemistry, because it gets him or her more involved in the broadcast, and then you can play off what they're doing. That's on the television side. On the radio side, it's still similar, although I mean, obviously you have to be more descriptive in the play-by-play. But it's like I think the other night working with Megan McPeak, I know some of her beliefs on the game, or thoughts on the game, or some of her hot buttons, if you will, and so I'm trying to push those to try to draw the best out of her, because if I get the best out of her, the whole broadcast sounds better.
That's a really interesting kind of concept there, is understanding your color commentator and how to tee them up to get the best out of them. And kind of how do you study that and learn that about your commentators in order to be able to find the best ways to bring them in and to allow them to shine?
I think it's a good question. I almost think it's just having lunch with them, having coffee with them, having or at least it is for me, when you start to get a feel for, but that's not unlike any kind of relationship that you're trying to develop with somebody in any situation where you're trying to find, we enjoy a conversation or a situation when we feel comfortable with each other. And so then I think that then transfers into the broadcast. If you're listening or watching or listening to broadcast and you're hearing two people that sound comfortable with each other, then I think that draws you in and it makes you feel, well, I'm kind of part of that, because I'm there's a and all these are kind of esoteric words, and sometimes I talk in things like texture and this and that, but I really think it's not something that, or at least I don't do it this way, where I would say to a new color commentator, I fill out this 10 questionnaire. Let me find out whether you like long walks on the beach or what or what you are, to try to figure out. It's something you have to do from feel, and that's why sometimes but I will say I've worked with some wonderful people, and I enjoy people in general, all different kinds of personalities, and which is, I think, why I'm in this business to begin with. So I've always enjoyed trying to bring the best out in whoever I'm working with as a color commentator.
I think that's just such a great point to take away from this, is when you have, or you're going to be working with somebody, really get to understand them and try to bring out the best in them. I think that's a really amazing lesson that I think especially young broadcasters can take away. One of the things I've heard you say tonight, as every good broadcaster should, when I go back and listen to the tape, or when I go back and listen to my last broadcast, and when you've been in the business and have achieved the success you have, the best thing is that the best are always learning and always looking to get better and always looking to continue to evolve. So when you listen to your games, where you are now in your career and your trajectory with your broadcasting, what are you listening for? What are you still working on and trying to tweak?
Well, probably everything. I think I still, with every game, I'll listen back to certain calls or moments and think, all right, I should have, if it's a radio call, I should have given the time more there, or people will say, oh, that was a great call, et cetera. And I'll listen and I'll say, well, you know what? I really didn't describe the defense as well as I should have. So those I don't think I ever walked away from a broadcast saying, wow, am I something else? This is just incredible. It's a wonder I can live with myself. I'm so good. No, it's more, I'm thinking, what, I sounded, I probably needed to bring it back a notch or whatever. And so that doesn't mean I'm, well, I probably am paranoid and insecure, but it doesn't mean I'm driving myself nuts. But I think it's, I do go in, I'm still to this day just trying to get it right. And it's little things. And, I'll go back and listen to I don't know. I was thinking about a bank shot the other day that caught me off guard, and I thought, well, I should have been more prepared for that, and I started thinking of better ways to describe that. So these are things that rattle around in my head all the time. I'm always, I don't think you ever stop, learning and listening and picking up from other people as well. I jokingly say I'm still trying to get it right, but I think that kind of attitude is important, and I think because it's I want to be better the next time. So how can I be better the next time?
I had a program director who used to always say, all right, fellas, you need to remember this. No one has ever done a perfect broadcast.
Right.
Never.
Yeah.
Dave, I want to ask you about developing a style. Kevin Harlan says, when you're young, you should listen to as many broadcasters as you can. Not that you're stealing their act, but it helps you in developing a style. So my question is that, how does a young broadcaster develop his or her own style?
You know, I think by listening to a lot of different things, or people, rather, broadcasters, it doesn't mean you're going to copy somebody, but just through osmosis or just because that's what you're around, you're going to start to pick up certain things, and you'll pick up certain things, or maybe phrases or ways of doing things. You'll pick those things up because they feel natural to you. And that gets back to this conversation that I can't be, whoever, because that's not who I am. I also think that and I tell this to young broadcasters, it's important to just say yes to everything as you're trying to develop your craft. I mean, I was a hit parade disc jockey, a country music disc jockey, a rock and roll disc jockey, an urban contemporary disc jockey, a newscaster. But all those skills I still use in what I want to do, which is sports broadcasting. Those skills actually made me a better writer. I think, for broadcasters, becoming a good writer is something that, writing, somebody once said, a good writer will never starve. Your writing skills, even though you might say, well, I'm doing play-by-play, what do I need writing skills for? Well, it helps you then in how you think, and then how you were able to convey the story, because in essence, that's what we are, is storytellers. And though there so many times I'll hear a call that I've done, and I'm thinking, where did that phrase come from? Well, that phrase came from just, when I'm writing sportscasts, it just gets in your blood, if you will. And so suddenly, then, as it's happening before you live, you're not sitting at a typewriter or computer, but your words and your descriptive as an event is happening is your computer or typewriter. So that's where reps, or whatever phrase you want to use, is so important. And I think, becoming good at what you do, but that doesn't mean you just have to do one thing. I think open yourself up to, many different things.
And I think it's really important for young sportscasters, young play-by-play announcers to understand it takes a long time to get good at this. It takes years before you're going to listen to yourself and say, you know what? I no longer suck.
Right.
I'm actually okay at this.
Right. Yeah, I'm hoping that happens to me in the next 5 years or so.
Go ahead.
No,
Shawn.
it's a, but that's why there's no substitution for,
Hey, I think we
Got me
lost
back?
you. There we
You
go.
got me back?
Yeah.
There we go.
I was trying to make a demonstration. I almost ruined the whole show. But the point is, there's nothing that replaces just doing it. Just doing it.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about reps as well, if I can quickly just jump in on that. Do you think that, sitting in front of a TV, recording yourself, doing a game, like, do you think that does it for you, or do you kind of have to be in that moment, like actually going to it? Because I remember as a freshman going to my college radio station, and they're like, all right, go into your dorm, sit there, watch an MLS game, and call it to practice to get to have some reps, because I'd never done play-by-play. like actually on air, only in my living room. And there I was doing it in my dorm, people walking to the shower, hearing me and going, what is that kid doing? And I felt kind of weird doing that. But it was valuable for me, I think, but nothing compared to the butterflies, the anxiousness before a game, just that build up. Do you think that the reps that you can get in front of a TV, do you think that they actually help? Or is it something where like you really do need to get those games? So maybe go to your local high school with the little microphone and just get the rosters and try and do it yourself. Like, what would your recommendation be to some of those young broadcasters to get those reps?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a right answer or a wrong answer on that one. I mean, again, I I started doing this, creating like so many. I'm not unique in this. Creating imaginary games where, back in the day when we read newspapers, I used to cut the lineups out of the newspapers, and that's how I would, form the lineups, and I'd perform a baseball broadcast or a basketball broadcast. For my mom, and those were in the box scores that had to fit into the newspaper. So if I'm so old that this is back when the Van Arsdales played for the Phoenix Suns, for example, and as a kid, 7 years old, it frustrated me because I didn't understand what an apostrophe, because they were trying to shorten his name in a box score meant. So there's nothing like actually being at an event doing it, and there's God knows how many examples there are of people that have and I'm trying to think of a guy who ended up becoming a Major League Baseball announcer, but he kept going to a ballpark and recording in a recorder, and he'd bring it back to the program director, and they'd say, no, that's not good. And he did it over and over again. So it is about, but it's not unlike other disciplines. You become a better accountant the more taxes you audit or whatever. It's the same with broadcasting. There's no replacement for, and that's why, again, I even say all kinds of broadcasting, because if when I was a disc jockey, there were no scripts. You just talked, and you had a 4 or 5 hour or 6 hour shift. And this is when I was doing it was more free form. The consultants didn't restrict you as much as they do now. And so now, if somebody tells me to talk for an hour, I'll talk for an hour. May not be that interesting, but I know how to fill an hour. I know how to kill dead air.
Now I'm the one who was on mute. One of the things we talked about, we talk about getting reps, talk about doing as many different sports as you can. And this was before I started working with you, Brody, so don't worry. But the first time I ever did basketball after calling a ton of soccer games, this player drove into the lane, and I said, takes the ball, dribbles into the box. And then I was like, oh my God. And so as somebody who does, 82 basketball games, and then you're probably around like game 75 when you make that transition to soccer. And obviously you've been doing it for a long time, but for somebody who is going in or even having to do different things on different nights, how do you make sure that you are kind of in that moment and in that silo, so you kind of don't mix up your terminology or kind of make any of those mistakes?
Yeah, the only thing I know I've done a few times is I can think of when I'm in the midst of a Wizard season, coming out of a commercial break. I just my partner's name is Glenn Consort, so I'm always saying Dave Johnson, Glenn Consort, back, whatever, et cetera. And I remember it was during a particularly crazy stretch where I had a Wizards game on the West Coast, flew back east to do a DC United game, and I came out of break and said Dave Johnson, Glenn Consort. It wasn't. It was Devin McTavish. So you do have those moments where you're not sure what city you're in. I can't. I'm sure I've probably done it, but I can't remember. Necessarily mixing a terminology or thinking about that. But it's like, look, mistakes are going to happen, and the only way you can guard against mistakes is be as prepared as you can be, and get as much sleep as you can get. Sometimes that does me in. So, but that's part of what we do. Where I've had weekends where I've done everything from field hockey to lacrosse and basketball on the same thing. So it gets back to, it's as much as you can be in that moment and not thinking about what tomorrow or the next half brings. It's just that moment is important.
And that brings up something that's really interesting to me, because, when I first started, I was, oh, you've got to prepare. Those who are the best, they prepare. But, I've had weekends like you where I have a soccer game at night and then a basketball game in the morning and then something else. And, you go through periods where you might have like 5 games in 3 days. And so, when I first started out, it was, I've got to prepare and it doesn't matter about sleep. And then there was, okay, well, I think it might be better to maybe not be as prepared, but to make sure you have enough rest. And obviously it's different for everybody, but how do you personally kind of find that line between, making sure that you prepare enough, but also knowing when, okay, at this point, maybe rest is actually more important than, learning or putting down 4 or 5 more stats or interesting figures?
I think, the one thing that once upon a time, there was no internet, and I always tell people, you felt like you would pretty much fully prepared. If you got the game notes and you talked to the coach and you read the media guide a little bit, you felt like you were done. Now it feels like you're never done, because just when you think you're prepared, somebody says, did you see that article about so-and-so? And you're like, oh, no, I didn't see that article about so-and-so. They send you the link and, it drives you nuts. But I think it's part of what helps me prepare now is just, there's so many things that I probably would have written down because I felt like I had to write everything down when I first started. And now it's and I don't know if it's just experience or what it is, but you just kind of, I just have a feel for what I think is interesting. And so I just focus on that, and that streamlines the preparation process. In other words, you could drive yourself bananas because there's so, everybody's got so many facts on somebody, and so you don't need to know everything. And if somebody tweets at you and say, hey, by the way, did you know so-and-so did this? Well, you don't have to feel embarrassed about it, because that's, not everybody knows everything about everybody. But I think it's, the what you believe will be important to the viewer or listener, as long as you've got that down, what the team is all about, how they play, whatever the big storylines are, that's a critical thing. There's a phrase that I learned from a great news director, Jim Farley, because I work at WTOP in Washington, and he used to have a big banner in the newsroom, and it said no WGAS stories, and WGAS stands for who gives a, and it's a 4-letter word after that. So, that's what happens, when you prepare, especially in this world of stats and analytics. There's some that at first blush that'll sound like, oh, that's, well, who gives a? And so I think you separate that out.
I think another thing, at least, sorry, Brody, for me personally at the beginning was like, I felt like I had to say everything that I knew. And at a point it's like, you're not there to show how much you know, or, take over the game. It's about the game. It's not about kind of what you know. And so kind of finding that balance of telling those things that you did prepare and know, and knowing when not to, spout off every single stat or every single storyline or tidbit.
Yeah, well, the game is the thing, and I think that just comes with also, again, reps and time and confidence. Where look, we all have an eagerness to please, an eagerness to prove in every aspect of our life, whether we're dating somebody or whether we're broadcasting. And I think sometimes when you first and I know I did it. You're tripping over yourself, trying to show how much I studied and how much I knew, and there's no doubt I'll listen back to broadcasts and I'll think, God, what was I on? 7 Mountain Dews or something? I was like, spitting everything out. But that's it's not a felony. It just I was eager to please and try to prove that I was worthy of the $250 I was getting.
That much?
Yeah.
You were paid a lot. Preparation.
Well,
I think preparation is obviously very important. But I think Serber brings up just a phenomenal point. You can prepare, and then you've got the game, in 7 hours, and you're exhausted.
Yeah.
You're just spent. I remember my first exam in college. I pulled an all-nighter, no dose, the whole thing, got a D on it. And that was the last time I ever spent 8 hours during the overnight hours studying for an exam. And I realized at that point, you can over-prepare. And along those lines, I tell my guys, do your preparation, but you're not going to use all of that in a broadcast. The number that I typically suggest is about 25% of what you've prepared is what you're going to use on the air. Do you buy that? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and that's probably even a high number. It's yeah, absolutely. There's again, the game is the thing, and I think as you get into a broadcast, there are only so many factoids that you study that are going to be that relevant, because there's only, if it's a good story, it doesn't have, you think about a good movie, it doesn't have 72 plot lines, it has one good plot line. So I think that's part of it with a game. I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but it's to Brody's point, it's just know you have it in case you need it. As I've always said, I still, and unfortunately with the multiple sclerosis, I can't write like I used to do, but people like they always would sell me on, or try to sell me on these automated game boards or whatever, game sheets, or there's services and companies that'll do this, and they'll say, well, we'll send you this and we'll update the stats for you and da 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 da. And I've always wanted to do it myself because that's my study, writing things out, and then I'll have it in front of me as I broadcast, but I really won't look at it because I've already written it out. But it's like a security blanket I have there, but I don't actually look down at it because I wrote it out and I know what's down there.
Dave, there's an interesting term called homer, and there have been some big homers over the years. Ken Harrelson, many years with the White Sox. Johnny Most, the legendary Boston Celtics broadcaster. And I hear a lot of young guys who they want to mold themselves after a Ken Harrelson. And I'll listen to their stuff, and all I'm thinking is, what a homer. Is there a place for a homer today? Obviously Johnny Most is a example of just an incredible broadcaster, but he was an incredible, homer. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, you're back.
You got me. I think it gets back to that why I'm hemming and hawing that question. I think it's a hard question. I think it's you just be who you are, and maybe if, and then the audience will decide. And those people you listed have obviously had very successful careers, and the audience decided that they liked them. As I think about, and again, everybody that does a broadcast, when I've done network stuff, I do it differently than if it's a Wizards game. I'm going to get more excited for a Wizards game-winning shot than if the Clippers hit the game-winning shot. Having said that, the other night, when the Clippers did tie it up, I did provide excitement because that was, again, it gets back to respect. My philosophy is you respect the game and you respect the opponent in this case. So, I probably just did a typical Washington thing. I avoided the question. I don't think I properly answered it one way or the other. I don't, because I think, when you're the home team broadcaster, there's a little home in everyone. But it's not good to be over the top. I mean, I've had people, say to me, and it's been a big compliment that I can't tell sometimes if we're winning or losing because you're still giving the proper respect to the other team's players. So if somebody just did a reverse dunk, I'm not going to say, I'm not going to show some emotion because I still respect what they did, even though they're on the other team.
You've been very open, not only tonight, but in the press as well about, not only having to deal with MS your whole life, but also having to deal with it now personally. And I just want to know, how has broadcasting and what you've learned in broadcasting or any sort of lessons carried over to that fight, or how you approach that?
Yeah, it's in many ways it's come full circle. As I said, I always appreciated as I was growing up the time I had to be at games or sporting events, and that's only been magnified even more now. And again, it gets back to we love it when our team wins or et cetera. But I'm never going to be an angry broadcaster. That's definitely not my style. I'm not about firing this guy or firing that guy. I do believe, again, I think of all the wonderful people and connections I've made through the sports I've called, and you're exposed to, people that if you didn't have that shared passion for whatever that team is, that you wouldn't meet these wonderful people. And now with I've been able to use the platform with sports broadcasting to raise a lot of money for multiple sclerosis, and so I truly believe that I've been have it now to finish the fight that my mom couldn't, and so I'm very blessed to have a platform to do that, and it just I still appreciate every game, even a 35-point blowout loss. I still appreciate the fact that I was able to do that. Not 35-point, not a blowout loss, but a blown lead that led to a loss. So it just, again, it gets back to several phrases to live by: respect the game, enjoy the moment. It's so important to enjoy the moment. Just enjoy the moment and enjoy whatever you're doing. When you're broadcasting, again, I joked about making $250, but no, I did women's high school basketball for $25, or I did God knows what for free. The first soccer game I ever did in a quote unquote professional situation, I paid to get it on the air. It was a Maryland Bays game in 1988, and I went to a religious station in Baltimore, and I still remember telling them, well, it's only going to be 2 hours, soccer. That's the beauty, 2 hours. And they said, "You're sure?" And I said, "No, it's not like baseball." And so they charged me $250 for the airtime. And I made a deal with the owner that if I got us on the air, he would cover my flight to Fort Lauderdale and the hotel, because we were playing. This is 1988, the APSL. Our American Soccer League, actually. And we were playing the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. Well, we're driving to Lockhart Stadium that night, and it's August in Florida. And I think you know what I'm about to say. It's all of a sudden charcoal black clouds. Well, it's thunder and lightning like you wouldn't believe. And I'm broadcasting a game by myself. And I'm literally, because it's a religious station, I couldn't sell commercials. So it's just me. And I was pulling people as they walked by the press box and just hoping they had something to do with the game. And there was a writer there or this and that. And fortunately, I didn't pull the hot dog vendor because I had to kill an hour before this lightning delay was over. So, and now I've lost the plot why I've told that incredibly boring story, but there must have been a reason. Why? How did we get on this subject? I'm sorry. It's late here on the East Coast, so
Yeah, and we should say it is approaching 10:30, and we're very appreciative of you letting us have a late start so that we could watch the U.S. national team soccer game.
Yes.
So thank you very much for that, and we can't thank you enough for everything tonight. This has been incredibly valuable, and as somebody who has been in the business for over a decade, even just getting to talk to you tonight, I'm still learning things. And so, thank you again, and want to let you know that, how much not only respect you, but respect how you're using the platform to raise awareness about MS and to fight it. We'll be making a donation tonight in your honor.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And we're going to end this the way that we, end every podcast, even though it is only our second one, but this is how we ended the first one. This is how we're going to end, the second one. We're going to ask two questions to finish off. And the first one is, everybody makes mistakes. And, like you said, you were talking about accountants. If an accountant makes a mistake, they can delete some numbers, they can put in the right ones. When you're a broadcaster, you can't hide, and sometimes you'll make a mistake and, everybody's on it right away. And in fact, it feels like today's day and age, people are just waiting for somebody to make a mistake so they can write whatever they want about you or say whatever they want. So as the last two questions, the first one, what is maybe one of the biggest mistakes that you felt you made in your career, and how were you able to come back from it?
I've made a few mistakes, so that's a tough question. I knew this question was coming, and I thought I've got to. All you can do is in the coming back part, you just own up to it and move on. And as hard as that is to do, and I've made silly mistakes. I still remember back doing. I'd just been hired not too long at WTOP in Washington, and I was doing afternoon sports, and to get out to the Capitol Center for a Bullets game, I had to tape a couple sportscasts, and so I was in a hurry to tape a couple sportscasts so I get out of the Capitol Center, and I inadvertently called. At the time, University of North Carolina played at Carmichael Auditorium, and Duke was Cameron Indoor Stadium, and so I mistakenly. And I knew it, but I just was in a hurry and I just misspoke. But that is not a good thing to misspeak on, because the station got flooded with calls. This is before Twitter, what's this idiot saying? The Duke does not play at Carmichael, auditorium or whatever. And so you're embarrassed, and you just have to move on from it. And it's every mic's a live mic. I was doing years ago an indoor soccer broadcast, and we were going to commercial, and I made a comment that I shouldn't have made about a player as I went to break. It was not a bad word I said or whatever, but I thought we were in commercial, and I had to face the player and own up to it and apologize. So mistakes are going to happen, and all you can do is own up to it, and move on. But that doesn't mean it's not going to, bother you and haunt you, because we all want to do the perfect broadcast. But as Brody said, that the program director is right. We've still yet to do one, so we're still trying.
And last question for you. And again, thank you so much for your time tonight and for your valuable wisdom and insight. Knowing what you know now, if you could go back and give the Dave Johnson who's just starting out in broadcasting advice, what is it that you would say to him?
That's a good question. I was about to say, relax a little more. I wanted to be in this business so bad. I mean, I was in college, and I took a job when I was 18, and I worked like crazy. And I was doing a hit parade music show while I was doing sports in college. And I look back and I think, I don't know how much I enjoyed of my college years because I was, working overnights and all over the place. But that's who I am, and that's who I was, and that's what I wanted to do. So, I think maybe I wish I had the opportunities that I think young broadcasters have now, where you can just, and certainly I take emails from broadcasters all the time, where it's easier to reach people, I think, and just ask them questions, and so don't be afraid to reach out, and you'll never know who's going to respond and what kind of wisdom they'll impart on you. So I think it's that's an important thing to don't be afraid of asking questions along the way, because but again, I've been blessed. I have had some great mentors, and we all need that. You can't, in any profession, if you're going to be successful, you do need some guiding wisdom.
Awesome. Dave, thank you again so much. And we can't wait to hear you on the next radio party.
Yes. Well, Saturday night, when hopefully we're not going to blow a 35-point lead and we'll win. So anyway.
And so when do you get started with DC United as well?
That'll be the end of February. So it gets busy over the next few months.
And other than the radio party, and when you get back going with DC United, where can we find you in the meantime? On social, on websites, anywhere?
At Dave J Sports is on Twitter, and then I still do Morning Drive. I'm in my 28th year of Morning Drive at WTOP in Washington, which is 103.5 FM. Or we don't need radios anymore, or we don't need dials anymore. You can go to WTOP.com and listen, or download the WTOP app and listen. But I'm still doing Morning Drive.
Awesome. And before we go, David, where can we reach you?
David at sportsbroadcastingcoach.com.
And Shawn, same question.
myname.com, ShawnMedow.com. That's the easiest way.
Awesome. And at Twitter as well, right, Shawn?
Yeah, that's my @ for everything.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Thank you so much again, Dave. And thank you everyone for listening to BS on Broadcasting. Until next time.